Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I hope you have enjoyed the talks as much as I have. So, we're here in a panel discussion with Marie and with Danny, and there has been a lot going on in the chat. People have been talking about your talks and also asking questions. So, Marie, about your Christmas tree, people want pictures. Obviously, they would like to see the Christmas tree with all the cooking ornaments, obviously. So
I will just post one on Twitter then.
yes, please, please. People are requesting that.
Sure. Sure, I will do that.
So, Marie, so I have heard that you are a very big fan of kitesurfing. And in fact, you were in Egypt last year to teach kitesurfing to a group of people that are deaf and hard of hearing. So I was curious, how does that go? Like if they're up in the air, how do you tell them, no? How does that work?
It does have advantages and disadvantages. So I have a hearing colleague there, and it's easier, of course, to call out to them if they're far away. But if there's a lot of wind, it's actually hard and it's easier to sign, actually. But a lot of students, they are looking up at their kites, and then I just, I let them go, and they have to come back at their own. So I just let them go. But I have to say, it's easy when you're standing far apart. You can just sign to each other, and when they take a break and they put the kites down, then we can just communicate. And it's very, very fun to do, actually. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow! Today I learned. Thank you. So, Danny, we also have like a couple of questions for you. So how do you deal with people when you are actually being labeled? Like, do you confront them, or what do you tell them? What does that? How do you confront them if you confront them?
That's a very difficult thing. I don't going to talk it by no confronting. I just how do I cope with that for myself? And
Oh, yeah.
first of all, I need to say that it depends who it is. Is it someone living close by, like family, friends, or the people like, for example, my Facebook friends, I call them the friends, the fools, and the family. With all respect, but they just, it's also a label, of course, but people think a label. So, but who it is, and I have the fortune, the big fortune that I have in my surroundings, the closest people that I have interaction with in my life respect me 100%. In the past, there were people in my life who are really asking stupid questions like, and sometimes you still hurt, but I learned to mind them, to let it behind. For example, you are not doing a paid job, you cannot going to work, but you travel around the world. I heard that in the past. But then I think maybe they are jealous of my life, and then you think on that way. And I have the luck that people in my really closest surroundings, I even have a coach, and even I have a very, very great backup from my parents, a very great relationship with my parents, and they learn me how to handle it. Worldwide, international is a difference because I see that it's getting great. It's going from, I mean the conference scene where I go. When I went in the beginning, it's already kind of that they accept as talks of accessibility and disability. That were the topics that I started about. And it's getting from good or great to better when I started, but I've just started in 2017. And even I can say that because I really identify myself, I love the Microsoft technologies and the Microsoft network and MVP stuff and also technology. When Satya came on board, just a whole vision about accessibility and inclusion. This is really international in this community. I really can belong and be myself.
Nice.
So I don't need to explain too much.
Yes.
They accept it.
Yeah, thank you. Marie, how do you deal with labeling?
I think it's a very interesting thing. I do recognize a lot of similarities between us. I think about the same questions that I get about sign languages, about that I don't hear, if I can drive a car, all sorts of things. I get the same questions, and it all has to do with labels. I don't always like to have those questions. I always have to explain myself, but what I think is that I want to be sort of an ambassador, basically, actually, an advocate for the community, and I want to show that I'm sort of a business card, actually, for the community that can show all the things that I can do. It's a list of things that I can. I would rather have them see that than something else. So I have to be patient, and I have to explain a lot of things all over again. But bit by bit, everybody gets a bit more aware, and I think the development is going in the right direction.
Thank you. So, Marie, you're a highly educated professional, and it seems challenging to go to college or to job interviews as a deaf person. So how did you manage? And maybe do you have any tips for universities or companies who want to hire more diverse people and want to become more accessible?
Well, I have experienced a lot of discrimination in my life where I couldn't use an interpreter in the university, where they would oppose that. Also with job interviews, I've had many issues that I've experienced. And usually I could tell that companies wouldn't want to hire me because I'm deaf, and they kind of talked around it and wouldn't be clear about that. But what I notice is that inclusion and diversity gets more important, but a lot of people talk about themselves being diverse and inclusive, but actually to get it out there and be active with it doesn't really work just now. So everybody has different needs, and just to ask somebody what they need is a good way to start. So just facilitate people with everything they need in their jobs. Just give them space to improve and so they can develop themselves and get to a higher level, and just believe in the fact that they can what they can do.
Yeah,
it's just I have a problem with diversity inclusion. It's a hot topic at the moment, but in the workplace, it's a kind of a tokenism when you hire somebody who is disabled, and then you feel like your job is done. Oh, sorry. So you have somebody with a different background or with disability, but you have to make sure they have the space to actually become a part of the company and in the culture. So that's something really to bear in mind.
Yeah. Oh, that's actually spot on. Denny, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I want to comment on that. And as my last talk, my last slide, and not so the last before the thank you slide was talking about diversity and inclusion just the beginning. Maybe I should see it otherwise. It's not talking about diversity and inclusion at the beginning. Diversity and inclusion is the beginning. That should be the new normal. I think that's a step we need to take. And even within diversity and inclusion, sometimes we need. It's very stupid what I'm going to say, and it's ridiculous, but it's how it is right now. Sometimes we need to create extra labels, even if the inclusion is being without labels, but temporary, because we are really coming from a very hard part where minorities were so really as minorities, and at this time we don't see them anymore as minorities. So we come from a very, very long past. So we are wanting diversity and inclusion, not only talking but having it. But this is just the beginning, and temporarily, even we need to make more labels for the better on the longer time, and it's very ridiculous to think about. I have an example. Because I'm not a fan of labels, but I had in the past a lot of negative labels. I really created labels for myself, positive ones, just to cope with the negative ones. But do you think about you are against labels, but you need to make extra ones? But it's a temporary thing, I think, the diversity and inclusion, that will become the new normal. And maybe we need to do something more, even getting more labels. Oh, how ridiculous that it sounds.
Oh, that's interesting. So Denny, what do you think the crossover is between labels and taboo subjects?
It's a very hard thing.
It's a very thin line.
I think it's kind of the same. I think it's the same as kind of. It can be the same. I think some labels are taboo, and it's not a taboo if you don't belong to some labels. So I think some labels, for example, man, woman is a label. It's not taboo. But some labels are taboo. For example, a volunteer or not paid. In fact, that label is taboo. I even have people in my surrounding. As I said, you can travel, but you cannot work. As I said, a spiritual passion as an IT person is total science. You shouldn't be thinking about other things. So I think the crossover is that some labels are taboo, and even, as I said, we try to belong to the label as normal as much as possible. So the farther that you are from the label normal, in fact, the more taboo it is, or it can be.
Right. And also, if we talk about allyship, I talked about that in my talk as well. With diversity and inclusion, that's more of a thing, and they ask people to be at their table to be the resource and give information, and then you get a thank you, and then you're pushed away, and they develop on themselves and take the advantage from that, and they have the financial gain. So that's quite important to try to prevent that, and not just to talk with people and ask for their resource and their time, but just to include them in the process and to learn from each other. And in that sense, the labeling gets changed actually, and so the bar gets lower, and there are no stupid questions to be asked. You should just sit together and talk with each other, and that way you can actually get to a creative solution, because there's so much diversity with people. You can be spiritual, you can and work in tech, and you can be a designer and be colorblind, for example. It's all possible. So I think that is the beauty of people, that we are so diverse and that there's no person that's the same as someone else.
Go ahead.
It's
Dennie.
also so that some people who are, and it's very hard what I'm going to say, I'm going to give a specific example, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but some people are considered being an expert in a role. Let's say it, now I call it web design. In a role, some people are considered as an expert, and if they say something, it's the one and only truth. But something is not true. I give an example. The font you all know, and you know the most hated font by designers is Comic Sans MS. But do you know that the font Comic Sans MS, some people, an expert, let's call it, sorry that I use this sign, and I don't think they are watching this kind of events, but it's bad, they said. But that is one of the most accessible tools for people like with dyslexia, or people with reading difficulties. Like I'm a developer also for people. I started with making apps for people with learning disabilities, intellectual disabilities. Comic Sans MS is one of the most accessible fonts, and then one Google put it, it's an awful label, a designer, but then so this also means that labels can exist. So go to Comic Sans. No.
Maybe just a silly question on my part. When you say a Comic Sans is a very accessible font, you mean it's easy to read,
yeah,
or it's
this the type of there are already articles on it. I don't have an example, but there's a complete article. The way of forming the letters. So how do they call it? The font is also a study. The font thing is way more accessible and more recognizable for people who have, for example, other ways of neural thinking.
Yeah.
Comic Sans.
Exactly. Actually, I learned that just last week, that's a fact. I was pretty surprised because I didn't know that, because I personally hate Comic Sans MS. I would never design with that font, but right now I'm seeing that from a different perspective. And it has to do with the sort of the weight of the font. So you have the A, you have to have the final part of the A has to like conclude the character. So it has, the vertical line has to be clear. And something that I learned, I want to look into that more. So that's a good point.
In the past, I worked with all my documents with Comic Sans. It really worked for me really great. And then I was really a teenager. I made some hobby website, and everyone was blaming it so ugly. And then I even more getting more and more in the tech, not only for a hobby anymore. You learn it's not the way to go, and then you come again years later. You focus, you get more in contact with other people with accessibility experts, and you see, but it is the way to go. Comic Sans MS.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. Today I will never joke about Comic Sans again.
Did you do it?
Yeah. Yes, me neither. I won't do that either.
Maybe. I'm sorry. Well,
That's an example of a label who is taboo.
You are absolutely right. I'm learning so much today. So thank you for that. I think we have time for one more question. So this is from the audience. Marie? We see big companies going for VR and AR technology. Do you think that that this particular kind of tech is inclusive for the deaf community, and what are the pain points there?
It's tough to answer that question because I don't have a lot of experience with VR and AR. I think it could be a valuable addition, but there are a lot of ways to get information. I think if you combine VR and AR with sound, you have to think about how you can take the sound away. and then that you still have, yeah, you can still give the information to a deaf user. I think that's the challenge, but that could be developed over time. I'm not sure if I can answer if it will be useful, but I think we will see with time.
Have you ever tried a VR techno? Have you ever?
No, actually I haven't.
Ah.
No, I should do that once, I think.
Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah,
Does it
I
work
have.
well?
I've been in a very bad zombie movie. I got scared, so I'm not sure if I will do
wow.
that again.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yes.
If you want, there is a time, and if people want it, I want to say some perspective on AR and VR for people with learning disabilities. I'm not talking about autism, neurodiversity, but learning disabilities, so people with intellectual disability, where everything for the DSO starts with. And it's a very difficult thing to think about. In the past, we wanted to create a creation on the HoloLens, so the AR system from Microsoft, or the mixed reality, the MR from Microsoft. And we have worked on it. We are trying to borrow a device, but there I think the biggest challenge is there are some challenges. First of all, how do you explain that this virtual reality is augmented, it's not really true? But I think that's not the worst case. You can work around that, and it can even make it more accessible. I have an addition, but there the most technical thing at that time was, and I think it's still the same, is the languages that the device exists, and I think it's well kind of the same for people who are deaf too. For example, if you are speaking perfectly or sign lining perfectly English, but if you are, I think most people, for example, in the Netherlands who are deaf, are not doing English. I think for all devices, for all the accessibility, and you can see this both. I think the most important thing that the tools will adapt to each language and each spoken language in the regions. Otherwise, it will also only be, for example, for some people with learning disabilities in the States or in the UK, or for people, I think, for deaf people, it will be better in the States or in England. So if one of the supported language is English, but yeah, I think language is one of the biggest pain points that need to be fixed before it will be helpful for people with disabilities. Or people with deaf, how you call it, yes, in common.
Yes. I think we have time for one final question from the audience as well, for you, Marie. As a Dutch person that's interested in learning a bit of sign language but doesn't know where to start, what would you recommend? Which language would make the most sense to start with?
I would advise, if you are a Dutch person living in the Netherlands, to learn Dutch Sign Language, so you can communicate with deaf people living in the Netherlands. And you can learn sign language in big cities. There are deaf meeting centers, deaf clubs. You could do a course there in sign language, and online there are also more courses, but I want to make sure that you keep in mind that you learn from a deaf person, because these are the best people to learn sign language from, because there are more and more hearing people who teach sign language, but I should say be aware of that. It's better if you learn from a native signer. There are different kinds of courses online. You have AB1, AB2, all kinds of courses, so you can find a lot of courses online and live courses as well. So, and it's also a great way to meet people.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, both. I'm really learning so much today, and we only just started. So I think we are ready to go to our next speaker. I hope you will stick around. We probably have way more questions for you both in the chat, so feel free to check them out. And I think we're now ready to introduce our next speaker.